Hey guys, we are live with one of the writers who, in my opinion, defined the late 2000s, 2010s at Marvel, who has done some of the best Marvel stuff we have gotten in those decades, and who is having what I would consider to be one of the highest points in his career right now. We are talking to the mighty Jason Aaron. And what I want to do real quick is see, because you've had such a prolific career already with no signs of stopping. I want to see how many of your titles we can name right now. Like even just between me and Tyler.
We would be here a while, Sean.
Well, they're all like right
Yeah, and
there.
then we have a
No,
cheat sheet in front of us
no
too.
cheating.
Yeah.
Let's go rapid fire back and forth, Tyler,
All right,
okay?
cool. I'm gonna start with my favorite Wolverine, the X-Men.
Okay. I'm gonna go with the Mighty
Thanks.
Thor.
Okay, Conan,
All right, name more.
Scalped. This is gonna go on forever, Sean. If we keep doing this, it's all gonna be good stuff too.
But it can get that granular when you're talking to somebody who has had the career that Jason has had. So, first of all, Jason, welcome to the show. We've wanted to have you on here for the longest, so it's an honor and a pleasure to have you.
Cheers. Thanks. Thanks for that. Thanks for that intro. Thanks to you guys for having me.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because, you're on right now, you've got Absolute Superman, which is insane. You've got
Thanks.
TMNT, which has been great, and then now Juan Ferreira is jumping on board, and that's going to be ridiculous. We
Right.
got to talk to him at Comic-Con and see some of the art that he was showcasing there. It was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then Bug Wars, which is on its way. Bug Wars is out February 12th, and we got the chance to read the first couple issues, and that was insane.
Cool.
And yet, it's almost like people are looking at you going, "Wow, Jason Aaron is red hot," but you've always been red hot. How do you feel about the way that you're sort of taking the reins of your career now that you kind of went away from your exclusive at Marvel and have the ability to carve your destiny out?
Yeah, I mean it's good. It's just good to change stuff up, I mean, I had a great time at Marvel. I have no complaints about any of my time at Marvel. Clearly, I'm still there doing stuff. Namor's coming out right now. I did the Uncle Scrooge book last year. I've got another new Secret Marvel thing I'm working on. So I still love the people there, love working on those characters. But after what, like 15 years of being exclusive, it was time to shake it up. I knew as a part of that, I wanted to go do some DC stuff. For me, I grew up as a DC kid. It was mostly DC books that first got me into comics back in the 80s. So I wanted to work on some of those characters. Turtles was a thing I'd never, even though I'd read Turtles again, going back to when I was a kid, I'd never really thought about writing those characters. I never really thought of that as an opportunity, but when that came along, I jumped on it, and I got to do some more Conan stuff last year and do Berserker and do a lot of different things. I think just that, people get used to being in the same place for so long, and it was nice to mix it up. And there was a point last year where I felt I was working for, I think, six different companies in one capacity or another at one time. So it's nice to like spread myself around all through comics. We might the this year there might be a, we can add another company to the list. I feel like there'll be, I'll work with somebody outside of the that six I worked with last year.
Yeah, I mean, you had an incredible year last year, and you kicked off your DC stuff with the combination of the Superman All Stars and then also Batman Off World, which has been killer. And it's weird because with Batman Offworld, like I typically don't see Batman as a character to be in space and dealing with some of that stuff. So, I was like, okay, it's Jason Aaron. I'm obviously going to read it, but I don't know how much legs this has for me. And then I get into it and it's like, oh shit. Actually, I've never really seen Batman like this before. I've never seen him put through these tests before. You had a different presentation for the character. And I've loved it. Can you talk about like how Batman Off-World came about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I knew kind of as soon as I came to DC, I wanted to do something in the Batman office, and I was Ben Abernathy, who was the Batman editor then, who's now at Kirkman's Skybound. I'd known Ben for a long time. I did a fantastic or a Friday the 13th book with him way back in the day. Um, so I knew I wanted to do Batman, but I didn't want to do just what you would expect. I didn't want to do like gritty street level Batman. I like the idea of taking that young gritty Batman, taking the Frank Miller, David Mazzucchelli Batman from year one, but putting that guy into outer space, where he's at the point where he feels like he's just started to figure out what he's doing in Gotham. He's just starting to get his game down and knows every alley, knows every thug he's going to fight there, knows how to bring him down. And suddenly this guy is faced with a completely different kind of challenge and plopped him into the middle of an environment where he looks around and he's like, what am I doing here? Like, I do not belong here, but he's got to do this in order to protect Gotham, right? So I like that idea of just doing a different kind of Batman story than we'd seen before. And it was also really like personally, secretly, it was me kind of paying homage to books like New Teen Titans and Atari Force. There were a couple of the big books for me when I first started reading comics.
That's cool, man. It's been great, and I know like we've got a Discord server, and so many of the people there are fans of that book in particular.
Cool.
Like it's really stood out amongst a pack of, quite frankly, like really good Batman books right now. So it's cool that, you knocked it out of the park like right away when you jumped over to DC.
Thanks. Yeah, and I can confirm that the last issue of that went to print last week. We've had long delays on these last few issues of the book. There was a lot of real world issues, involved with some of the folks working on it. So been a tough year, was a tough year for some people, but that issue 6 is done, went to print, so it's on the way, and then the collection will be coming soon after that.
Beautiful. And delays happen and they suck, but once the collected edition is out and people start getting it that way, there are no delays in that. You can read it all right there, so it's all good. Now, we gotta get into Absolute Superman because this is the book. So for me, I said I think Absolute Superman is the one where they kind of have to, you and Rafa, you guys have to like go different. We need to see a different side because Superman is in a really good place right now in mainline. So
Sure.
what are you guys gonna do that's gonna be additive to that character, and honor him, but also live in the absolute world? And issue 3 just dropped like a couple of weeks ago, and holy shit. Like the origin that you've crafted with Krypton has been, not only is it incredible just as a story, but it's also very additive to kind of the way we can think about Krypton, getting to experience Cal's parents as people and
Right.
not just like props in his memory bank or whatever. uh it's been amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, that's one of the parts that's been the most fun for me is the Krypton stuff. I mean, to the point where it was really difficult to write the issue where the planet blows up. I mean, spoilers, Krypton does blow up. Like that's the one thing I can tell you is the same from the origin, but yeah, I think I've loved being able to craft a story that to me, feels like it's present and pertinent and relevant to today. And it's very much like, what does this character look like? How is he different if we made him up now as opposed to the 1930s? Um, and within that, just playing with the idea of like being precious about nothing, like looking at it like we can change any part of his origin without changing kind of the core of who the character is. If anything, I think that the things we've changed only kind of reinforce those themes at the heart of this version of Superman. And so when you do that, like you create opportunities to have a lot of surprises, right? Like you think you know how this story goes. Um, and even, like in that issue 3, I think if you haven't read it, I won't talk about all the spoilers, but I think there's things even within that in terms of how it goes when he leaves the planet that are surprising. And we'll get the rest of that story in issue 5, and there'll be more surprising. So finding ways for you to read a story that you've probably read 1,000 times before, right? Like we've all seen Superman's origin so many times, but if we can do a version of that where and still surprise you in the way we're able to like pull at your heartstrings, like that makes me really excited.
It
So that yeah, that's been one of my favorite parts so far.
and how is the I guess balancing act there? Because at some point it's got to be like, all right, I need to do changes, but I can't change too much, or it becomes unrecognizable. So as you're writing this, how do you know what's subtle? Because I think a lot of the changes are subtle, but they are still core to the character of Superman. But how do you I guess walk that tightrope when you're making these wide changes to this character's origin?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to know why you're changing stuff. It's not about just changing things for the sake of changing it. Like you got to have a guiding directive. I think with this story, that was kind of always easy. To me, it was going back and looking at, okay, why did Siegel and Schuster create Superman? What did he mean to those guys? As a couple of children of immigrants, like, looking at Superman as this sort of idealized immigrant story, or kind of the Moses story of the baby in the basket going down the river. Like, okay, if we look at those things in the context of today, like what does that look like? If Siegel and Schuster were young immigrants in this country today, what does that character mean to them? So some of it was just that, like having that piece of it, and then everything else kind of fell into place around that. So everything I changed, about Krypton, about Superman's time there, about how he came to Earth, what happened once he came here, like where he is when the story starts, we pick up with him. All those things are pretty huge changes from the regular DCU version, but to me, they all follow from that guiding principle and the core part of the character and what really will propel him in the same way where I wrote 100 issues of Thor basically about the idea of worthiness. I think this will be a long run of Superman that's still just about that question of, what he represents and what he fights for.
I love that. I love it. And guys, if you're not on board, Absolute Superman is just 3 issues in, so there's not a massive barrier to entry. That's one of the best parts about this new Absolute universe, is that you really can just like buy 10 total comics and you're caught up on everything that's going on. So if you're not up, get up, stay up. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, it's been the
Go ahead.
response. Oh, sorry, this response has been really overwhelming. Like people have embraced this new absolute universe, and all 3 books have been doing really, really well. Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, and then now you got Flash and Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter coming soon. So it's still like you can read any of those books and not read any of the other ones and still get I think a story that's very complete and fulfilling. As things, with the absolute universe stuff still feels so new and fresh, and we've all just been mostly focused on our own books and talking about bigger plans of how we start to weave those together and how we start to build a universe. So that stuff to me is really exciting too. But we didn't want to put the cart before the horse. It's very much about let's do cool, new, fresh versions of each of these characters before we worry about trying to throw them all together into some other sort of story.
And I think that is a big piece of why this feels so good, is because there's there's a feeling that it's very creator driven. Like, you know, a lot of us were around during the New 52. We've heard the stories. That felt like a very top down situation at that time. And I think some of the problems that they experienced working there at that time were those features where it's like, okay, this isn't creatively driven. But you've got, Joshua Williamson, you've got Scott Snyder kind of, thinking about this and ruminating and coming up with the nuts and bolts of it. Two very talented people. And then I guess they bring you on, they bring Kelly on, and everybody who is coming down the pipe. What was the approach like, and how much lead time did you have?
We talked about it for a while. I mean, the kind of started with Scott Snyder called me one time and said, he was thinking about this, or had kind of just started talking to DC about the idea of a new universe. He didn't know what book he wanted to do. He wasn't talking to me about a specific book, just about the idea of being involved. Um, and at the time I'd kind of just started working at DC. I was very much in the mindset of like, let me do a mini series, let me do some small things. I just came off 15 years of doing ongoing series after ongoing series at Marvel. I very much did not want to dive into another one. And then pretty quickly, I'd signed up for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Absolute Superman because I realized, well, look, these opportunities aren't like run of the mill and not the kind that come along every day, right? If I just want to write Superman in the DCU, there'll be opportunities to do that, right? That character's not going anywhere. The chance to create a brand new universe, brand new version of that character. If I say no to this, that may never come around again. So I realized pretty quickly, like, yeah, I want to be involved with this, and I knew I wanted to do Superman. Like the idea was there. Like I mean, I could have said, um, like, oh, I'd love to do Batman. I'd love to do whoever. Scott already had some ideas about Batman that I thought were really cool, and I felt like, you should do that. I think he's talked about he was more reluctant just because he's done so much Batman. He felt intimidated by the idea of coming back, but it was pretty clear that he had some cool ideas that, if somebody's going to do them, they should be him. So I focused on Superman pretty early. So it was initially just Scott and I on the phone a lot, and then Kelly got involved, and Jeff and Al and everybody else, and so now, yeah, it does feel very creator driven, and it's kind of just us in a room, not just making up stories for these characters, but really making up our entire absolute universe, right? Like, and it does feel very much like just a small group of us in a proverbial room throwing stuff at the wall.
And you're getting to because you're at DC now, you're getting to play with different characters, but you're also getting to, I would imagine, like work alongside, because you talk about working with Scott. You guys have been on opposite sides of the pond, so to speak. And I'm sure you've got a friendly relationship, but what's it like now to get to, sit down and actually crank out a story together or work on something of this magnitude, as a unit with people who you may not have even ever gotten to interact with in this way?
It's been great. I mean, it's all been part of, in addition to all these new books and titles I'm working on, it's just part of what has made these last couple years feel so fresh and exciting, of just a lot of new. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm working with people that I've known for a long time and been a fan of their work and been friends with, but yeah, we've never collaborated together in any way. I mean, I was at Marvel long enough to kind of go from the new guy to suddenly I look around and realize like, oh, it's like me, only Dan Slott's been in this room longer than I have, right? Like me and Hickman kind of were the two new guys once upon a time. So
Oh yeah.
suddenly you look around and it's like, oh no, we're the old guys now. So it's nice to change it up and go somewhere where I'm the new guy again, like I working with Scott or Josh, who have been working for DC for so long and know these characters so well, and I'm kind of the new kid showing up, taking my first crack at them. It feels good.
Would you say that you feel like reinvigorated and recharged?
Yeah, I mean that always to me implies that I was like run down and worn out before,
Well,
which I don't think was the case. I mean, I definitely had um, I mean, I think we all had trying times there for a couple of years, like as the world went to shit, and my personal life changed quite a bit. I got divorced, which I I did a book basically about that with Once Upon a Time at the End of the World at Boom Studio. So it was a challenging time, and working through all of that, working through COVID, working through, you know, traumatic life changes, uh, was a challenge. But so I never feel like I was burned out or anything. I definitely knew it was like time for a change, just in terms of not being exclusive anymore and pursuing other opportunities. But that was also something I'd kind of been, I'd known that for a while, like that I felt when this contract is up, I don't think I want to do another one. So, but yeah, it does feel like it gives you some new energy, to be able to, again, just work with all these different companies I've never worked for, to work on all these different characters I've never gotten a chance to write. I mean, getting to write Uncle Scrooge, for me was like a dream, and that character means so much to me personally. So yeah, all that stuff, it does feel like I'm reinvigorated, though I don't feel like I was, not that vigorated before.
Go ahead, Tyler.
We have a comment in the chat by Rami Darwish. She said Jason's work on Scrooge is the best after Don Rosa's, which is that's a pretty big.
Oh, cheers. Well,
Yeah.
Carl Barks is rolling over in his grave. He might have
I
something to say about that, but
know.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I love Don Rosa's work.
Since we're referencing comments, MJ Looney with a 10-pound super chat says, loving these creator conversations. I just wanted to say to Jason Aaron that Absolute Superman's third issue was one of my favorite single issues that I've read in a while. Thank you, sir.
Cheers. Thank you. Yeah, I really had fun with that one. I kind of didn't know till I sat down to write that one that it was going to kind of turn into a kid on a bike story, with Kal-El. I mean, I wanted Kal-El to be active and be participate in the story and have it not just be about his parents. Initially I was thinking about, well, Jor-El's, trying to reveal the truth and gets arrested, and Laura's got to go bust him out of jail, and that's a cool action story. But then I realized, well, I don't want just Kal-El sitting at home, you know, blindsided when his parents tell him, hey, the planet's going to blow up. So I wanted him to be out figuring that out for himself. And it's also kind of establishing, I think, so much of, or a big part of what I've been trying to do, with this version of Superman is kind of get away from the difference between Kal-El and the kind of Clark Kent persona, right? And that Clark is like an affectation. So we established pretty early that young Kal-El likes to write. He's an awkward kid. He's not like an athlete. He is in no way Superman as a kid on Krypton, right? He's much more Clark Kent. He's a nerd. He's a writer. So in that's issue where we see him kind of go out and be a reporter. He's going out and figuring out what the hell is going on in Krypton, and then he's the one who breaks the story to the rest of the planet and kind of figure before his parents can even tell him what's happening and what they're going to do. He's figured it out, most of it out. There's still one part he's wrong about, which you get at the very end of the issue. But yeah, it's all about just trying to make him more of an active part of his own story.
I think it's worked really well just to make Krypton feel alive.
Right
And
before we kill it.
but it's like I care about the history of the place now. I want to know why the people of Krypton seemingly have submitted themselves over to AI, like what caused that. You said that we're going to see a little more in issue 5 of sort of the origin, which is awesome. I feel like you could even like there could be so much more story there.
Yeah, I mean the good thing is that we can kind of always go back and do Krypton stories just from his memories, like the fact that he wasn't a baby when he came over. Like it's important to his identity that he's Kryptonian. He has a very real Kryptonian identity that he remembers, and very real relationships and culture that he remembers and no one else does. So that'll continue to be an important part of the story, even, many issues after we've blown it all to pieces.
One of the things that you've done really well in, and as you mentioned, building his parents up. They haven't been, fully fleshed characters that have interacted with Cal in the past, and so I'm curious, in what direction did you kind of build them? Are they products of something core to Cal, and then you've tried to see how he would have been raised in that kind of fashion, or is it an independent process and you're telling kind of stories with three characters as opposed to one based off of our central character?
I mean, it was really just about giving Kal-El that kind of, in some way, that loving, idyllic upbringing that we equate to Smallville and to the Kents, but on Krypton, right? Like he grows up in the rural parts of Krypton. He grows up with parents who aren't highfalutin scientists. They're a miner and a mechanic, and they love him. And his parents are his best friends, maybe his only friend, friends other than his dog Crypto. So it's just sort of supplanting that what we normally associate with Smallville to Krypton. So when he loses that, he's really lost something. It's not just a planet that he knows about because he sees, crystals and the stories from crystals in the Fortress of Solitude. He remembers his parents, and there's a lot of heartbreak there. So yeah, I mean that was the main idea, and just his parents have been Jor-El and Laura have been shown in a lot of different ways over the years. Sometimes loving parents, sometimes not so much, right? So I very much wanted to show that despite everything that was wrong with Krypton and the ugly parts of it, like where he lived, he loved it. He would have been happy to have lived there his whole life. So there's a real sense of loss when that's taken away from him.
And one of the things I really appreciate about the flashbacks to Krypton is that even though like time wise for the progression of the plot of the Absolute Superman story, we're kind of back in time, it's still progressing a Kal-El forward as a character, even in the present day, because of how the power dynamics of Krypton are. He was a champion of the oppressed before he was ever Superman. He was a kid, and seeing that mirrored in what is the absolute universe's Earth in the bits we've gotten so far, kind of still progresses our understanding of who this character is forward, even though we're in the past. And I thought that's really interesting because when we see him in issue 1 and in issue 2, he is that champion of the oppressed, even on Earth, and it really helps me understand who he is as a character, and why he would do this, even in a world that isn't necessarily his home.
Right. Right. Yeah, thanks. I just noticed your Gore the God Butcher there.
Oh yeah, that
That's
was a plant. Yeah.
um yeah, I mean yes, yeah, the present day parts of that Kal-El's going through, like, um that kind of continues to develop in issues 4 and 5. Issue 4 focuses a lot on Lois Lane. Also introduces the Omega Men. This very new, different version of the Omega Men. And if you have kind of Lazarus Corp, who Lois is working for, is pretty clearly like a nefarious force on Earth, right? They're kind of the force that promises prosperity, but kind of treating people like cattle and working them to death. The Omega Men come in as um, an opposing force to that. They're very much anti Lazarus Corp. Um, and we'll kind of see Superman caught in the middle. Um, and they're going to be a lot of challenges for him of figuring out, like you said, he kind of knows who he is in some ways before he becomes Superman, before he comes to Earth. But where he's at now and everything he's been through and the loss and trauma he's suffered and how he's been treated when he came to Earth, it's not a straight line that he's going to walk in terms of being Superman. Like there's still going to be some challenges he's going to have to fight through to really figure out what does that mean? Who is he here? He knows who he was before. He knows where he came from, but who is he going forward? He still doesn't really know. And it's going to be a challenge for him to figure that out.
Sean, you're muted
Oh,
there.
you're
Yeah.
We got a question from Matt Fisher, who dropped a 4.99 super chat that said, "Hi, congratulations on having the best absolute book. Any chance of us seeing a Southern Bastards finale? Until Lois marries Peter on Vulcan, make mine comics pals." Wow, Matt, thank you.
yes, everybody asks about Southern Bastards. I have answered this as well as I can many times. Yes, I would love to have the finale out now, the continuation of the story. I've been working to try to make that happen, but it's a complicated situation, part of which is beyond my control. I continue to try to figure out a solution. I've worked a lot on Southern Bastards in different forms over the last few years. There's just nothing I can show you in regards to it yet, but I certainly haven't given up on that. The book means a lot to me personally, and it kills me that it's a big question mark hanging over it. So yeah, just know I haven't given up on it.
Have faith, Matt. Have faith. Gavin Gidry says, "Jason, would you ever consider working with an LSU Tiger fan?"
The No, absolutely not. Why? That sounds like a terrible idea.
I guess.
Look, the only reason I would say yes, I guess, if we were somehow in competition against the Big Ten. So I think it's still SEC first over any other conference. That's the only way. But I still wouldn't turn my back on an LSU Tiger. Wouldn't trust them.
All right. Well, I guess Gavin will have to stick to drawing JSA with Lemire for now.
For now. Luna becomes a channel member, re-upping for 3 months. Says, "Is there anything you can say on Supergirl for Absolute Superman?"
No, nothing I'm gonna say right now. Yeah, I could answer that question. I think I'm gonna choose not to though. We'll just have to wait and see. I don't want to reveal. I mean, I was very happy we were able to go so long without really revealing so many of the changes from the book, right? Like I think DC thankfully kept so many of those secret, so people were surprised by you know things in the issues as they read them. So I will continue that going forward as much as I can because there's still surprises to come. There'll things that are surprising in issue 12. So we haven't gotten them all out of the way yet.
And I think that's so much fun. Like that's a big part of the fun, I think, with the Absolute Universe is that, yeah, you know who these people are, like you've seen them before, but you don't know the twist, you don't know the angle, you don't know the reason for them now. And that's really compelling.
Yeah, I didn't expect to see absolute Tigor or Tigor show up before Supergirl, but I'm excited for it. So Omega Man, yeah.
Well, don't assume you know who's going to be on this Omega Men team. Like I said, it's not exactly. I mean, I love that old Omega Men book. That again was one of those early books. I read. I got into the Teen Titans. That Omega Men arc of New Teen Titans was one of my favorites. So that I was all over that Omega Men book. But this is not exactly the same thing as that.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk Bug Wars. Bug Wars is on the way. You guys definitely want to be adding this to your pull list. It drops February 12th. That's when we get the first issue. We had the chance to check out the first couple of issues, thanks to Jason. I actually have a signed copy of the
Cool.
the preview copy that we got at New York Comic Con, which was awesome. Um, Bug Wars shocked me. Like it knocked me on my ass
Cool.
because I thought, okay, all right, it's gonna be about, bugs fighting. That's cool. And then, we get to a particular page, and I don't even want to like I don't even know how to speak on it without spoiling, but there's a twist that comes around that I personally didn't see coming, and it redefined what this series was to me. in a lot of ways. And again, I don't know how much you feel comfortable saying, but I do want people to know that like there's a lot more to this than whatever you think this is in the best way possible.
Are you talking about what happened to Slade's dad? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about the fact that Slate and them exist at all and kind of the difference between them and the bugs and how that gets introduced.
Oh, sure, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about like this is a combination of two different kind of stories that we've seen a lot of different versions of over the years, right? There's like the story of the kid who shrinks down and goes on an adventure in his backyard. That's like the Honey I Shrunk the Kids kind of story. There's also stories about, tiny people who live secretly, right beneath our feet, whether that's the borrowers and the littles or a big book for me when I was a kid was Sword of the Atom, from DC, where Adam discovers this like kingdom of tiny frog riding people in the jungles of Brazil. So this story is both of those together. This is, kid finds this hidden amulet, um, in the basement of this house he just moved into, which is a house his dad used to live in before he died. Dad was a famous entomologist, but he finds this amulet. Next thing you know, he's shrunk down to the size of an insect, and he's lost in his own backyard, where these warring kingdoms of tiny barbarian warriors called mites, who live among the bugs. This is a backyard in a small town, backwoods Alabama, but this yard is infested with the most dangerous insects from around the world. And his dad died bankrupt, owing, thousands to exotic insect dealers all over the planet because he's buying up bugs. And so this, if there's a weird and wild real life insect that you can think of, it's in this yard in West Bottom, Alabama. So Slade is now, lost in his own backyard, um, amidst all these warring sects of mites. There's the beetle barbarians, and the ant mites are kind of like the Roman Empire. And there's the spider witches and the wasp raiders, sort of like wasp riding Vikings. The maggot monks are the creepy religious guys. And in the midst of this, Slade realizes he's going to have to fight to literally save his family. Um, so it is in some sense this, kind of sprawling dark fantasy story where we bounce around through the yard and explore all these different locations and these different kind of mites, and who all live among different sort of insects. But at the heart is a story about family, and about this kid's relationship, this mom and his dead father and his older brother, and what he will do kind of to preserve his family legacy. Um, so it's elements of it, like that, kid getting shrunk down, going on an adventure, idea that you might normally associate with a kid's book. This is decidedly not a kid's book. Don't let your kids read this. Um, it is, I've said it's like Honey I Shrunk the Kids meets Game of Thrones, or if Honey I Shrunk the Kids was written by Garth Ennis. Like that's sort of the
Oh
idea
my
that
God.
we're going for. So these bugs kill people. Um, the little mite people and also big people too. Um, so there's all sorts of weird, disgusting real bugs like the bombardier beetle who sprays boiling hot acid out of his butthole. Um, I mean that's creepy if you're like a full size human, but imagine if you're like the size of a mite and that butthole's pointed right at your face. Like
Yeah.
that's even scarier. So um, this backyard is a dangerous place for Slade to be, even as he's figuring out kind of what powers and what place he has there with this amulet that he's found, and what connection that has to his murdered father.
So I'm decidedly not a bug guy, Bugs scare the hell out of me.
This
Are
is the perfect book for you then.
Oh, I had a lot of fun with it. It was great. I got to see some bugs get killed. Cool. But were you into bugs beforehand, or was there was a story first, and then learning about all these different types of bugs? Like, oh, I could put this butt spraying bug in my book if I wanted to.
The no, I was not I wouldn't say I was a big bug guy before this. I mean, I this book is in some ways maybe the most personal book I've ever done, surprisingly, because like when Sword of the Atom came out, I was I think 10 years old. The lived in this house in Piney Woods, Alabama, with a huge backyard, kind of surrounded by woods. If I wasn't reading comics, I spent all my time running around that yard in those woods, like playing with Star Wars toys, running through the woods with a stick, pretending it was a sword, and kind of following. There was a stream that ran through there, and I'd just follow it for what seemed like miles. So it felt like I was playing in this sprawling kingdom myself, right? And while making up all these elaborate fantasy sagas in my head. So that was like my Hyborian world. That was my Middle Earth. It was that yard and those woods. The yard of Bug Wars is that same yard. Like I drew the map for the book based on my memories of that yard. Like we pulled up, Google photos of the house. So the house is the same. So this is literally like where I grew up, where I fell in love with stories, where in my mind I became a writer, like in that yard in those woods. So this is literally the fantasy kingdom where Slade is exploring. So yeah, like I do a shitty map. We got Becca Carey, our designer, to do a cool version of the map, which you get in the back of issue 1. But yeah, this is literally, I think in a very real sense, a book I've been wanting to do since I was 10 years old.
You do a really good job of world building in this with the drops of what we might see in the future, and then to your point on the map, being able to visualize the size of it, you can kind of almost start to break out these kingdoms in your own head. You make the mode lands. I thought was a hilarious concept for this is what's clear, this is what we can do, but beyond the brush, right? Beyond all of that is
Right.
where our story takes place. And I'm most excited to see how you continue to develop the world, and that's because we've only gotten a few things here. You had mentioned in the back matter the Chronicles of Narnia as written by Garth Ennis,
All
so I'm
right. Yeah.
curious to see how that fleshes out even further. Like, what are the fullest extents you can do within this magic world?
Yeah, I mean this book 1 of Bug Wars is 6 issues, a 6-issue story. It takes us to kind of different parts of the yard. We go to the brush pile where it's like sort of the main city of the Beetle writers. It's a little like Moss Isley. It's like a hive of scum and villainy. It's a rough and rowdy kind of frontier town called Swarm City. Um, So we go there, we go to some ant hills, different ant citadels around the yard. We go to the hanging gardens of Weird Web, which are like the secret temples of the spider witches hidden inside some potted ferns hanging on the side of the house. We go to the Cathedral of the Maggot Monks, which is in a dead dog on the side of the road in the front yard. And then so we travel around the yard quite a bit. There's still a lot of it that will remain unexplored in this first art, including the house. Like there's also mites who live in the house that we glimpse and reference, but we don't know much about them. So yeah, and then there's like whatever's going on in the woods, which seems to be something really, really scary. So there's a lot still left to explore. Like I said, this is book 1. This 6-issue story is book 1, which does tell, in my mind, like a satisfying story in and of itself. um, but ends with much much more to be explored. So we the issue 1 goes to print next week. Like so as we stand now, we've got the first 5 issues are completely done.
Oh wow.
completely drawn. So we're working on issue 6 right now, the last part of this, and I'm already starting to work on kind of what comes next. So this is still very much just the beginning of something. Again, like I said, I feel very much like I've been waiting since I was 10 years old to do this, to build this world. I for some reason, like as me, I grew up as a kid who loved fantasy stories. For some reason, I've waited, 20 years in my career before I'm doing one of my own. I mean, I wrote plenty of Conan, which I loved, but I don't know why I waited so long to kind of make up my own because I'm loving it so much. I mean, I feel like I have probably worked more on this series than maybe anything I've written since I did The Other Side, which was the first book I ever did, Vietnam War book. Like you know, worked like crazy on that one because that was my kind of first chance to step up to bat, right? This I keep working on it because I enjoy it so much. Some of that's just going back and refining like the world building part of it, fleshing out these different kingdoms of the mites. You get some of that. You'll get some of that in each issue. In issue 1, there's like back matter pages that are excerpts from Professor Slaymaker's journals where he's telling you like this is what the ant imperium is like. These are the different kind of ants that you'll find here in the yard. So issue 2 we'll get that, but for the beetle riders and beetles, and we'll get that for the spider witches. And so some of it's just going back and diving into all that stuff. I keep going back and tinkering with the scripts I've already written. And Mahmoud Azrar who my co-creator on this, did such an amazing job with the designs of all these different mites. So it's just, I'm having such a blast. Some of it's like, why did I wait so long to do this? And certainly I'm not going to stop. Like we're going to continue to do more of this because it's so much fun.
And your work with Conan, with Mahmoud, and Matthew Wilson, I believe, worked on that as well.
Yep.
It was my introduction to that character, and I love that series. But when it
Cool.
comes
Thank
to
you.
something like Bug Wars, which I think we can tell how personal it is to you, just by the way you talk about it. What is it like having to work on something so personal in a medium that requires a team? Like, how do you handle something that personal to you and having to, I guess, I don't know, not delineate, but like have other people build something that's been internal so long?
Yeah, I mean, I think just excitement and enthusiasm goes a long way. Like I think if I'm really, I mean, the more excited I am about the project and writing it, that shows in my script, right? And really, the script I'm writing is just for one person. It's not for whoever's going to read this book ultimately. It's for the person who's got to sit down and draw it, right? So if I can communicate to them like this is what this means to me, this is how I'm excited I am about all that. Hopefully that gets them excited too, and then they have to find their own personal connection to it. It can't just be mine. Mahmoud and I been doing a lot of podcasts and interviews this week, and he was talking about how he grew up in Turkey in a place in the city in a kind of the house very different from where I grew up in a tiny little backyard, but he was back there too, like digging holes and playing with his He-Man toys, just like I was. So it like he still find his own way to connect to it, that's different from mine. And I think Mahmoud's doing some of the best stuff he's ever done. I mean, I loved working with him on Conan, and we did a lot of different versions of Conan, especially in that first Conan the Barbarian arc, where every issue we kind of jumped around to a different country and a different point in Conan's life. But I think the world building stuff and the epic scope of the stuff that Mahmoud is doing here, it kind of blows away what he and I have done before.
I really wanted to say that this is a book that for me has a lot of heart. Um like it starts off really fun. You have the bugs going to war, but then when you see how fragile their lives are, how a very simple machine that we don't think anything of just, getting rid of your grass, getting rid of the weeds, like it destroys their entire environment and ecosystem, and there's thousands of lives lost. Like that moment in the book made me stop and think. It was cool because I didn't expect to see humans in the book, but then it was also like, oh shit, like that's pretty sad. Um, and then, seeing the family dynamics as well, there's a lot of, really deep stuff going on there. So this just feels like a perfect marriage of like fun, bug wars, hijinks, and chaos, and everything you imagine goes with that. But then also, like you said before, like a heartfelt family story. I think that really comes across like right away. I always think about the first issue as like, here's what you can expect from this series in a lot of ways,
Right.
and almost like a contract, and I sign, like I think this is exactly what I want it to be. So I encourage
Cool.
everybody to go out and pick this up when it drops February 12th. You will have a blast, I think.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's been a fun time. Like we said, these last couple of years for me, I've been working on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Absolute Superman, which are thankfully two of the biggest books of last year. The other thing I've been working on all this time is Bug Wars. Like we've been working on this for a couple of years. We put a lot into this in terms of building the world, getting ahead, so the book will absolutely come out on time. So if I would say if you enjoyed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Absolute Superman at all, this is a very different kind of book. But this is the third thing kind of in the trio of projects that have been taking up the bulk of my time these last couple of years. This is the third one. So I'm happy to finally have it coming out for people to see it.
Yeah, I think if you like Jason Aaron historically, you will love this, and if you've never read a Jason Aaron book at all, you will love this. I think everybody should give this a shot.
I don't even
If you
like
love
bugs.
bugs, if you
Yeah.
hate bugs, even
Right.
Yeah.
if you're indifferent about bugs, it's the book for you.
Absolutely. John Carlos dropped 9.99 on us. Big fan of the pals as well as Jason. This is cool to see. Was wondering if Jason always wanted to use the orb or was it a directive? Either way, I always thought that was fun. Thanks for the stories.
Well, I first wrote the orb in Ghost Rider. And
Right.
there's an arc where a lot of different Ghost Rider villains, old Ghost Rider villains showed up. So just kind of came from that. I kind of created a new version of the character. Before the orb was just a guy wearing like a motorcycle helmet that looked like an eyeball. And I'm like, no, this version is actually going to have a giant eyeball for a head. And then you get glimpses of this kind of really awful, heartbreaking backstory that he's got. Like it's been difficult to grow up as a dude with an eyeball for a head. So I just kind of enjoyed that character, and he kept popping up and everything I would do. I put him into Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine, and then it was actually Tom Brevoort when I was doing Original Sin that said, you should really put the orb in this. So that one wasn't even my idea. And then he was in Doctor Strange, and I finally killed him off in the end of my Avengers run. I did like when I went to Terrificon last year, which is an awesome convention in Connecticut. If you've never been, bought a shitload of comics. There's so many. It's like a sea of comic vendors, which I love. But I bought this issue of Superman. I don't remember what issue it is now, but there's like a Superman villain who's got a giant eyeball for a head. So it's like the universe is plopped it in front of me to be like, hey, DC's got their own version of the orb. Um, but we'll see. I think um if I if I have a version of the orb like a character at DC that I continue to go back to is maybe a more obscure character, it may turn out to be the character that I wedged into one of those issues of Action Comics that I wrote, which is Blue Devil. Like Blue Devil, another one of my favorite books from the 80s. Absolutely loved that series. That character's changed a lot over the years. He was like a lighthearted character back in those days. If you've never read that book, like I hugely endorse it. He's a guy, he's a stuntman in a movie. They're shooting Blue Devil the movie, and he's just a guy wearing a costume. And then one scene they accidentally uncover a real demon, and he kind of uses his trident and special effects to fight the demon. The demon blast hits him, and at the end of the issue, he goes to take the costume off and realizes he can't. Like he's bonded to this costume. Like that's his origin, and then he just becomes this weirdness magnet where weird stuff is always happening to Blue Devil. So I absolutely loved that book. So yeah, I snuck him into one panel in Action Comics, and I don't imagine I have written my last Blue Devil scene.
That sounded pretty. That's a pretty cool story, actually.
Right?
I know
That's
nothing.
such a ridiculous but cool origin.
It's kind of
Now
gruesome in a
the
way.
problem is that like the character's been changed a lot over the years, and I think he's gotten darkened up, and became a little more Hellboy. Um,
Magic based.
yeah, so I just prefer that old classic, freewheeling version. That was a fun book.
There's a Kid Devil too. I think he's got like a
That is Kid
sidekick.
Devil. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
Well, you guys heard it here first. Expect Absolute Blue Devil coming in 2025.
Spoilers, spoilers. I really just wanted to write Superman as a way of segueing to doing Blue Devil.
The master plan revealed.
Yes.
Um, Mauricio Vaz actually asked what I think is a solid process question. He says, I don't know if anyone asked writing process related questions, but I would really like to know how Mr. Aaron outlines his series and issues, or more broadly, what his pre-writing is like. Is that something you can get into at all?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I've got like there's a shelf of notebooks back there, so I've just keep a lot of notes like as I'm turning projects over in my head. Like when I sit down to write an issue, um, I mean, I just hopefully I've got it outlined to a point where I kind of know kind of the major beats of each issue, and then I just sit down and go like list out 1 through 22 or however many pages it is, and just kind of write the very bare bones, like these are the most important visuals or dialogue or moments from each page, and then just kind of start building it from that. So it's always like a building process, just like you're building a house. You do a foundation, and then you put some walls up, and you sort of filling in pieces as you go. So I kind of, I go through the story multiple times, just sort of adding layers each time I go until the last part is going through and writing the final panel descriptions.
I love how most of the time when we ask a question like that, you get a very different answer. Like it seems like every writer
Sure.
sort of has their own process behind the way they approach this stuff. It's very cool.
Yeah, and if you look at 5 different writer scripts, I mean, they all look different too. There's kind of no set format, no set way to do it. It's kind of whatever works for you. I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do it. This is just the way I've been doing it, for 20 years.
Do you do you adjust your process at all based on the artist that you're working with, or you kind of
No, not at all. I mean, the only times I have are when I worked a couple of guys like Adam Kubert and Chris Bachalo that I worked with. I did more Marvel style, which is still not straight up traditional Marvel style, which is kind of just a plot basically. This was I'd still kind of write the same version of the script. I just wouldn't break it down into panels. So I might say, pages 1 through 3, here's what happens, here's all the dialogue. Just you break it down however you like, because Chris is especially is so idiosyncratic in that I am not going to write a 16 panel page for anybody, right? Because I feel like they would murder me. But Chris draws the most amazing 16 panel pages. So when we first started working together on Wolverine and the X-Men, I was writing full script, and he's still like, he's going to draw it the way he sees it. Look awesome. So it's like, well, let me just get out of your way, and let you do that. So that's the way we worked the rest of Wolverine and the X-Men. And then all of Doctor Strange was like that. But
love
not,
that?
that's a matter of, that's what he wanted. That's the way, um, the way that it worked best. So not every artist wants that, right? So usually I've worked full script, but even then, it's like it's not like this is written in stone. These are the 10 commandments carried down off the mountain. It's like, this is how I see the story, but if you see the story differently, you know, go your own way. Like Juan Ferreira, who's you mentioned, is taken over on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Um, issue 6 is his first one, and then 7's the beginning of the second arc. Like one's been amazing. So the same thing. I work full script for him, but he still has room to like change and tweak things, and he's brought a lot of ideas like the to the book. And what he I mean, we've had a ridiculous murderers row, ridiculous no the number of amazing artists on Turtles so
Oh
far,
yeah.
like 5 different kind of, you know 5-star artists, to begin this book's run. So it's a hard act to follow. I mean, we knew like kind of issue 6 needed to be the one where, okay, we get one person from this point forward, because it's kind of where all the characters are together, that story wise, everything kind of comes together. The Turtles are finally back in New York. And I was super blown away by what Juan's done. Like you guys, I met him in New York for the first time,
Oh, cool.
um, and got to see those pages in person. And I was like, holy shit, like these looked good, in my email, but seeing them in person, they look even better. So I'm super excited for people to see what he's been doing. I think you got to realize like, oh, this dude was born to draw these characters in this kind of story.
Wow, I couldn't agree more. The preview pages we got to see knocked me on my ass. Like I was flipping through that book going, "Oh my God, like this is what the turtles are about to look like." They've looked great throughout the 5 issues, but it's exciting to now sort of be, getting a series artist, somebody who's going to stick on the book, and this will be the path going forward. And then it's Juan Ferreira is so exciting. And it's worth pointing out that issue 6 is right around the corner. That it drops on January 29th. So,
Right.
um, like you said, the turtles are back together, and I love it because as someone who, I wasn't tapped into the Sophie Campbell stuff. Your turtle stuff is really where I'm coming in with these characters in comics. And I feel like there are things that I think I know based on like the movie or based on TV or whatever, and there are questions that I have that feel like mysteries that are unfolding. Like, who's their central antagonist? Why haven't they been together? What's
Right.
the beef between them? Like, these are all things that we don't quite know yet. And throughout these 5 issues, getting reintroduced to these characters. For some of the readers, this is the first time seeing them in a comic book. So, what are the differences? That's been really
Right.
exciting for me.
Cool. Thanks. It's been fun to play with all that. I mean, it's a great time to be doing Turtles, 40th anniversary, like the last Ronin stuff that Kevin Eastman and Tom Waltz have been doing has been blowing up and super cool. And I loved those 150 issues of that IDW book, mostly by Tom and Sophie. Um, so it's great to be able to follow that. We're not throwing any of that out. Same continuity. This is just like a relaunch, a jumping on point. Like you don't have to have read any of those. You don't have to have read Turtles comic ever. Like I want to show my work and show you who these characters are here in this book and why you should want to hang out with them. And yeah, it's not a great time for the Turtles and sort of what they've been through and where they are in their life. And they're kind of a bit older, and they're rubbing each other the wrong way even more than ever. And the pieces kind of don't fit together like they used to, and they don't really know how to fix it, and they can't even really agree on what went wrong before. And then this first arc has been called Return to New York, yet none of them have been in New York this entire time. Issue 6 is where they finally come back to the city, gonna set things right, get back to being the Ninja Turtles again. And it just does not go as planned. Like New York has changed. New York has been weaponized against them in a huge way. And by the end of issue 6, they realize like, oh shit, like this is going to be a lot harder than we thought. And there's also the readers get a surprise too. Um, Something that the turtles aren't necessarily privy to, that that you are reading it, that I think will be a good little surprise that set things up to moving into the next arc, which starts with issue 7.
I think it was smart to break out the issues by each turtle. You know, you get to you get a flavor for each. You get to understand. Maybe even you get to pick out which is your favorite based on the issue and the surrounding events that happen. And to your point on trying to bring people into the fold there, you know, similar to Sean, maybe Tyler as well. We have been following based off of the older run, and so we're all now on board. Now we're all coming back to New York, not just the turtles, but the
Right.
readers alongside. And I think that's been an effective way to reintroduce them to a larger audience.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. And then having one on board doesn't hurt either. Um,
Cherry on top.
yeah.
Not at all. And the again, going back to like the way this story has unfolded, it even makes me want to know, what did I miss out on? Like, do I need to be the archaeologist and go back and read the prior run? You know, like I didn't realize how much I think I love these characters in comics.
Good.
Um, so, you know, hats
Well,
off, man. It's
then
it's incredible.
you've got a lot of hardcovers you should go pick up. IDW does really, really nice looking hardcovers.
Yeah, yeah, they've been shared on the Discord, and I look at them and I'm like, I might need to add those to my collection. And then, of course, yours when it eventually does drop.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask if you have had the chance, a little bit off topic, but I wanted to ask if you've had the chance to see the trailer for Superman and what your thoughts on that were, if you did.
I I did. Yeah. I mean, I actually, I was among the group that got to go to the set last August.
Oh, it's
A bunch
incredible.
of us comic folks, and they showed us like they didn't show us a trailer, but they showed us like a cut up of a lot of different stuff. Um, and yeah, I think everybody there felt like a lot of the people seeing this trailer just excited. It looked super cool. Like we none of us had seen the costume. They hadn't shown the costume online yet, right? And we went to the set and we're standing on the set, and then Superman walks up in full costume, and we're all like, "Holy shit!" And you could
Wow.
feel, you could have heard a pin drop because it's all. I'm there with, Jerry Ordway and Dan Jurgens and Frank Quitely and these guys who clearly know that costume better than most anyone. So they're just, again, none of them had seen it, so they're all just, everybody's like checking out this costume, like every inch of it, um, in real life, and everybody came away happy and impressed. So um, I think for a group of comic book creators to walk in and see everything they showed us, and we all came away more excited than we were before. Same way looking at that trailer, like I still don't know what the movie is actually about. I don't know. I couldn't tell you the plot of it.
Right.
Um, but man, everything I've seen in terms of the tone and the look, the feel of it feels like, yes, like spot on. So yeah, I'm super excited. I'll be there opening night.
Absolutely. And it's cool because it feels like Superman is, you know, we all love Batman. But I think, like, in my mind, Superman is the sort of the centerpiece character of DC. And I feel like now he's really being positioned that way. Like, even in the comics, you know,
Yeah.
they've talked about like the Superman energy and then the dark side energy as a contrast to that. And it just feels like the character is propelled to fly higher than he has in decades. And it's cool that you are sort of shepherding that growth in the absolute world. Like there are people who are going to read their very first Superman story, and it's going to be yours.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, that's really, really exciting. I mean, I remember when, again, like the age I was when those first Superman movies came out, those were huge for me. And Superman was a big part of me getting into comics. Most of the first comics I read had Superman in them, whether it was World's Finest or DC Comics Presents. Um, I've still got, like, there's a Superman nightlight that was mine when I was a kid over there, and my Superman the movie trash can is over there next to my comics. So, um, yeah, Superman's been a big part of my history and kind of why I'm here, right? I think why any of us are here. You pull him out of the timeline, and does any of this happen in the same way? Maybe not. So, yeah, it does feel right that Superman should be at the forefront, in terms of the comics, in terms of everything that DC's going to do with the films. So I'm really hopeful that's the movie we're going to get that's going to solidify that place. And yeah, it's a man, what a huge thrill and honor to be a part of that legacy and to be, like you said, doing a brand new version of that character where we're just getting started. We're just up to 3 issues so far, and I don't plan on going anywhere. I have said that, I my time at DC has really just started. I've only done a couple of books so far, but I'm looking at this as like I want this to be for my time at DC what Thor was to my time at Marvel. So that means I need to stay here for a nice long run. So that's my plan.
It's funny you mentioned how like absolute like ushering in absolute during this year of Superman almost is exciting. It could be someone's first book, but we have one of our listeners here, Atomic Hound, says, "I just want to make sure Jason knows that as a 55-year reader of Superman titles, I love his
Oh,
take
dang.
so much." So it's like
Oh, cheers.
it's like
Thank you.
everyone from all sides, kind of enjoys Superman together.
Right. Nice. Yeah, appreciate that.
We got a couple of comments about the Mighty Thor. So Luna with the 199 super chat, thank you, Luna, says the Mighty Thor was my first Thor book. I loved it. And then Mike Elliott also
Thank you.
said, um, Jason's Thor run is legendary, and I'd love to ask how he feels about it, looking back at it, especially after such big changes. So I guess like a reflection on that monumental story, and taking it from the beginning to the fact that we got to see that character in a fucking movie. Oh
Right.
man,
Yeah, Jane's always, can you see? Like she's always back there.
yeah.
She's right behind me. A bunch of Janes. It's like the I've said that was probably my favorite part of the whole Love and Thunder experience was just all these toys that I got. Like got the Happy Meal toys and the Lego figures and everything. Um, yeah, I think um, probably if I'm working in comics another 30 years, I think I'll still feel the same about Thor and about the Mighty Thor in particular, that was special. That was a special story where everything came together in the right way. Like the story I was trying to write, what Russell Dowderman did in the art, the response to that story, the kind of emotional resonance of it, the fun of it. Um, like they they're not all going to come together in that perfect way. That was kind of a perfect storm, no pun intended, of Thorness. Um, and which I feel that way about my entire Thor run. Like I'm proud of all that. There are a lot of different kind of stories within that, but I do think the Jane part of it feels special and kind of feels more so every year goes by. Um, I have no desire to kind of go back and try to do that again. I mean, I loved a couple years ago. I did this short Jane story for one. I don't remember, one of the Marvel Age
Oh yeah.
1000 or one of the big like Marvel anthology specials, and Pepe Larraz drew it, who of course is one of the best artists alive today. So that was awesome to kind of revisit Jane for a few pages and tell a little story, unseen story from her time as Thor. Um, and I've loved seeing that character continue on and continue to have a place in the Marvel universe, and would love to see more of her on the big or the small screen from Marvel Studios. We'll see. Um, but it's still like I'm happy to always be considered a Thor writer. Um, but I don't think I've got any more Jane story to tell.
I mean, I look back on that run, and I know Tyler has similar feelings. I look back in that run, and it is the defining Thor run, like for me, since I have been reading comics. I love everything about it, and it was. I feel like we're almost in an age where the like really long run is sort of coming to an end in a lot of ways. We don't see it as much.
Sure.
And I think yours is one of the last ones that we got where it's like not only was it long, but it hit the ball out of the park and it did so many different things. Like it was special.
Thanks. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to do long runs, you know. I mean, even, I think of my Thor, my time on Thor as one long run, but it's across like how many different books? 6 or 7? I don't even know. Different ongoing series, minis. There's a lot of different titles, that came into play. Like you read it now, you can buy the omnibus, and there it all is together in 2 books. But still, it was hard to kind of just to stay on the book as things get relaunched and change for all sorts of different reasons that have nothing to do with you, right? Like there were multiple times I kind of had opportunities presented to me that would have involved me leaving Thor, and I had to say no, I'm not done. I think I kind of had been there at Marvel long enough that I had the confidence to say like I'm not leaving until you fire me or I finish the story I'm trying to tell, right? Like, and that's going to take a while. And thankfully, I was able to do that in the way I wanted to.
Do you ever pinch yourself, man? Because you you grew up a fan of Star Wars, you wrote Star Wars, you grew up a fan of Superman, you're writing Absolute, like you wrote Conan, like you've done so many things that I think most of us in this space grew up fans of. Like your storytelling talent is all over these spaces that we all love so much and that you grew up on. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that never gets old. I mean, I think the day it does, I should, go work at Home Depot or something, right? Like I should find a new line of work. Like I think, yeah, that stuff is still exciting to me. Getting to write Scrooge and write Conan and Superman for the first time. Like the that I if I should be super excited, right? I should be as excited as I was when I first sit down to write, my first Wolverine story back in the day, or do Ghost Rider for the first time, or put put words in the mouth of Spider-Man for the very first time. Like that never gets old. And I never stop taking that for granted. And you always gotta feel like every one of those properties is a new opportunity, right? Like those are different audiences. There are plenty of people who had never read any of my work before Star Wars. There are people who never read any of my work before Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There's DC fans who had never read my work until I started working there. So I think everything you do, is like in some way it's the first time you're stepping on stage. Um, and the like the number of times I've been to conventions lately and had people come up and tell me like, "Oh, this issue of such and such was the first comic book I ever read." Like that makes you super excited, right? Because it's like, "Oh shit, and you're here!" Like, well, welcome. I'm glad I could be your gateway drug for getting here. So I think you have to feel like that every time I sit down to do something new. Like somebody is reading this, who's reading my work for the first time, maybe reading this character for the first time, maybe reading a comic book for the first time. So don't rest on your laurels, like doesn't matter what you did in the past. Like it's about this, it's about what you're doing right now. And it's got to be the best version of that it can possibly be.
I mean, like to speak for myself, I'm one of those people. Like I remember my first Wednesday, I went to get comics by myself, with my friends in high school. I picked up one of your issues of Ghost Rider off the
Oh, cool.
shelf. It was right in the lead up to Secret Invasion, and Ghost Rider's head was green. It was like a secret variant or something like that,
Oh.
and
Sure, yeah.
it just blew my mind. I'm like, oh, what is this? And I picked
Yeah.
that up. I thank you. My wallet maybe doesn't thank you as much because I've followed you since. But
That's
yeah, I
awesome.
mean
And now
that's
here you are on a
exactly.
podcast with your Gore the God Butcher figure.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
Orbs in the
we've
other
come
room. Yeah, orbs in the other room.
we've come
So
a long way.
exactly.
I got my orbers around here, so I just
Oh, I
moved.
was
So
hoping you would have your orb. Yeah.
Where is he? He hasn't made it. There's a Marvel shelf up there.
Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, this is, we talked about the summer of Superman. This is the summer of Jason Aaron. This is the year of Jason Aaron. I think that what you have going on right now is so exciting, and I encourage everybody to get on board with Absolute Superman. I encourage everybody to get on board with Bug Wars big time. Because, you know, of course, we all want to see Absolute Superman succeed. It's a massive book, big sales. I feel like when it comes to Bug Wars and stuff like that, that's indie, that's, a little bit more personal. For those of us who want to see indie books and want to see the biggest names going to those spaces, we have to support it when they do. So Bug Wars is out February 12th. Go make sure you pick that up. And by the way, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has been fantastic. It's sometimes people say things about IP books. This ain't one of those IP books. This is a tremendous series, and it's got real great talent behind it. So go pick it up. January 29th for issue 6. This is kind of where we're finally getting established with the Turtles all together. We've got the series artist. So if you haven't, for some bizarre reason, read the prior 5 issues, you can absolutely get in on the ground floor right now with issue 6. Jason, thank you so much for honoring us with your time. Really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate all that. Thanks. Yeah.
Absolutely. Hopefully, we can have you back on the channel someday. But either way, it's been a pleasure to have you. And I look forward to all of your upcoming work, sir. Thank you.
Cheers. Well, yeah, I mean, I'll have more. Just like the last year, I wrote a lot of things that were surprising, right? Like hearing that I was doing Turtles or Scrooge or Superman. All those things were a surprise. There'll be some more surprises this year. Beyond those books you talked about, there's a couple other things I'm about to start working on that will take you off guard, I think.
Jason Aaron, Powerpuff Girls. That's what I need.
Exactly. Revealed here for the first time. I am a big Jindy Tartakovsky fan, so if he called me up and wanted me to do it, I'd probably say yes.
Samurai Jack too. Oh man.
Yeah, Primal. I would do a Primal
Oh,
comic if he wants to do that. If you haven't watched Primal, holy shit, that show's awesome.
I don't
Phenomenal.
even know what that is.
Oh, you gotta watch that one.
Yeah.
Is it an anime?
it's a cartoon.
Animated,
It's a
yeah.
it's a cartoon, yeah. It's animated series. Like two seasons. It's 2 seasons. It's
Okay.
a guy and his dinosaur
Oh,
go on adventures.
you
And
had
it's
me at dinosaur.
fucking brutal. It's brutal.
Awesome. Well, now in addition to Jason's comics, I've got this show to watch. So we've got to get out of here. Thank you so much, Jason. To the pals, we will see you guys on Friday for Pals Pulls. Remember, Friday, 6 p.m. for that. We will see you then. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time.